Hi, and welcome to Habs Unfiltered, episode 161. I'm your host, Blaine Pudvang. I'm joined now by my co-hosts, Treg Wilson,
Good afternoon.
Matt Smith,
Afternoon.
and our special guest, Craig Button. How's it going, Craig?
Going good. Come on, get right into it. Don't be sitting here like biting your lips and pursing your lips. Come on, let's go.
I have no idea what you mean, Craig.
Oh, yes, you do. Listen, I'm the one that uses the line, I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. There's no reason for you to start acting that way. Okay.
It's not an act. No, it is great to have you on the show. We've been looking forward to getting you back for quite some time. And yes, we are going to tease a little bit from time to time. But we're not gonna, destroy you over one prediction. If we were to do that, then everything we said would be destroyed all the time.
Yeah. Well, a good friend of mine says this about predictions. You can only be one of two things, right or wrong. There's no in between with predictions. So, you know what? Watching the Canadians all through the season, and certainly the start of the year, was every reason to. What we're seeing right now with the Canadians is what we saw in the first 3 weeks of the season. It was quite impressive, and then they went through their roller coaster, up, down, and kind of twisting and turning, and with it, the Habs fans' emotions went with it, and then. After those first 4 games, I'll be straightforward with you guys. I was shocked, honestly. I thought Toronto was the better team going into the playoffs, but I was quite shocked by how dominant they were in those first 4 games. But then, and probably sometime in game 4, they started to try some different things. But, from that point forward, and certainly in game 5, there was a path to victory. And they built on that in game 6, game 7. They haven't stopped. They haven't stopped in 7 games. And you may have heard me say this before in the last 10 days or so, but this Canadiens team reminds me a lot of the 2012 LA Kings team. There was, they added Jeff Carter. They had good goaltending, depth in their forward group, but they made some adjustments in their play, and they were a bottom seed. They were an 8th seed in the West, and they started rolling, and there was no stopping them. And, I know there's lots of different comparisons that can be used, but the 2012 Kings, are the one I'm using right now to watch this Canadiens team.
Now I'm looking more at something a little closer. I thought watching the Canadiens play the way they have, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Dallas last year.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. What I would say is Dallas was a really good defensive team last year. They didn't give up very much, and then Hudobin got in the net, and you look at Dallas. I mean, Dallas was an overtime away from losing to the Colorado Avalanche, and that was with Colorado's 3rd string goalie, Michael Hutchison, in the net. So Colorado took it pretty far, but you're right. When Dallas started to really get their game in order, and then not just in one area, but in all areas, they became a very difficult team to beat. And certainly I think that's an appropriate comparison, year over year from 2020 to 2021.
Do you think this Canadiens team we see in the playoffs is what Dom Ducharme was trying to put together when he took over as head coach?
What's interesting for me is I love Dom, and I've watched Dom, and I think he was more than deserving to be the head. And certainly when they started under Dom, you could see the things that I thought that he was going to implement. And then I don't know what. I talked to Guy Carbonneau about this, and it was like we couldn't put our finger on what wasn't working. Like, you could see things that weren't working, but we couldn't really, explain it. Like, they still had all these things that worked in place, and then they weren't going in. And then it was like, from my observations, it was like they reverted back to, okay, we're going to shoot the puck at the net, and we're going to try to, score off the rush. And, they became one-dimensional again, or what I would say, not multifaceted. And so and that's what was confusing for me is you watch Dom come in, and they were attacking in different ways, and they became they took a multifaceted approach to scoring, and then it's like they stopped. And I remember Bob Gainey telling me this when he took over as coach back when he took over for Guy Carbonneau, ironically. he said, you sit there and you watch and you have all these ideas how you can, what you want to do with the team. But there's certain things that have been ingrained and it takes some time to really unwind them. And so Dom started, then you're starting to, I don't know, struggles the right way. Now you just say, okay, we're going to play it a little bit safer. But you get into a situation like the Canadians face in Game 5 where it's damn the torpedoes, right? And it was at that point. And when you look at how, they started to get chances off the cycle. They were getting a lot more slot shots and they were getting the puck into the slot area. And now they became not only a good team off the rush, but now they were in zone offense. So, I almost think that that's something for Dom to answer, but it became surprising because you saw signs of it and then you didn't see signs of it. And then, like I said, after those first 4 games against Toronto, it was like, oh boy, like what's 4 goals in 4 games? And, if it wasn't for Carey Price, it could have been over in 4, but, Carey Price is a part of the team and significant as we all know. But, I think that, I guess in a roundabout way, looking through the whole thing, I think Dom's happy with the way the team is taken on this multifaceted approach to scoring. And, and I think that it is what he wanted. And I think you saw signs of it, that you didn't see signs of it. Then when they had their backs up against the wall, they brought it out. It was like a full bloom of what he wanted to see.
Now that Game 5, how much of that finally clicking for them kind of plays into the momentum that they've been building? Do you think that's a main piece of what they've gotten so far?
One of the things that happens in the playoffs is who your opponent is. So this year, Toronto and Montreal played each other so much. So they knew each other very, very well. So what you're trying to do is try to maximize your strengths. And at the same time, try to limit the other team's strengths. And, in Game 5, I think there was a couple of things that really occurred. Dominik got to 4 defensemen. He just said, Sherratt, Weber, Edmondson, Petrie, Toronto doesn't want to dump the puck in. So you're not going to have to go back and retreat and retrieve all the time for pucks. So he just said, I'm playing my 4 big defensemen, right? And then Toronto, Montreal knew exactly what Toronto was going to do, and Toronto never, ever moved out of that. And now here's Dominik, here's the Montreal Canadiens are going, okay, we got 4 lines, we're going to roll them. We got 4 defensemen, we're going to roll them. We're going to press up in the neutral zone at the red line and at the blue line, and we're going to put pressure right down to the goal line. And Toronto never adjusted. Toronto never adjusted. How many times I always laugh when I hear this. Well, if we just play our game, your game isn't working. Montreal's game in the first 4 games wasn't working. Toronto's was. But when Montreal adjusted and they really, really took away Toronto's strengths. Now, keep in mind, 2 of those games went in overtime. I know that. But I thought Montreal had a really good game plan approach and adjusted approach. And I think once they got knowing that it was, what the Stahl line was going to do was going to be different than the Kotkaniemi line, which was going to be different than Deneau, and everybody was contributing in a really significant way. And, once you start, having all those pieces come together, Carey Price had his game in order, but now all those other pieces strengthened up. And when the pieces become stronger, the whole becomes that much stronger. And I think that's exactly what ended up happening with the Canadiens. And certainly, we can look at it. Mark Scheifele going out was a big blow to the Winnipeg Jets, but Montreal got stronger as that series went on. They got stronger and stronger. And Dom said, Game 3 was their best game. Well, he wanted to see a little bit more in Game 4. He did. He got even more out of Game 4. If it's not for Connor Hellebuck, that game's over long before it gets anywhere near overtime.
So with the momentum that the Canadiens now have going into this series, they were down 3-1 to the Leafs, came back, and now they've won 7 straight. But we look at the Vegas Golden Knights, hard-fought series against Minnesota. Then they go down 0-2 against Colorado, and they've won 4 straight. In your opinion, does any team really have momentum going into the semifinals with one winning 4, one winning 7?
Okay, so here's a couple of things that I would say. So you're always looking in terms of scouting and evaluating your opponent. And I think Montreal is similar in so many ways to Minnesota, but with much, much better goaltending. And that's not a criticism of Cam Talbot. Okay, that might be the guy at my door. You want to can I come back to this real quick? Just
absolutely.
Bill, we'll come back to that question. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So we're just happy that Craig Button has given us some of his time. You'll notice that he has stepped out now to deal with some personal stuff going on. He's getting some tires changed on his car. All right, so we can go back. Oh, there he is. Is he coming back? Oh.
No, I think he's just.
No, he's going to pay the guy.
Getting some money.
Well, as we mill about,
yes.
How are you guys doing?
Oh, doing great. But I'm just, Craig's right into it. Jumped right in. Yeah. He wanted to tackle that whole first round thing.
Well, he knew it was coming. Yeah. You're not going to go on a Montreal podcast and not know it's coming. So
actually, it was not planning on really saying much of anything about it.
No, he kind of did it himself.
And that's what I appreciate about Craig is that hey, I said what I said, and now I'm going to take my licks. Let's move forward.
Have some fun with it.
Yeah, I'm not exactly going to be eating his lunch over that. I mean, out of the four of us, one of us has a Stanley Cup ring, and it's not any of us here.
Well, actually, I do have a Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup ring right here.
Yeah, but where'd you buy it?
It's not. I got it for Christmas. I don't think it's real. 19. I don't even know what year it is.
You get a 1 in 24 chance.
1 in 24 chance.
1930. Yeah, 1930. So I was minus 44.
10 years old.
I was minus 44.
You were 10 years old at the time. All right,
yeah,
Matt, you weren't on the show on the weekend because you were
unfortunately
supposedly working.
Yeah, saving the Air Force.
Yeah. I'm sure you listened to the show and you heard us making fun of you.
You always do.
But I wanted to ask you a question from that show so we can get your 2 cents on it while we're waiting on Craig. The Petrie injury, how much of an impact do you think that's going to be?
He's going to be massive. We've seen that he's been skating around with a kind of like an alternate glove right now. If if he can't grip his stick properly, it's going to really take a weapon from the blue line. And how much pain is he really playing with right now? Who knows? Obviously, the playoffs, you get to play with some bumps and bruises. You got a couple dislocated fingers, and you're an offensive-minded defenseman. It's really going to hamper your game a little bit. But I'm hoping that he's in tonight. I'm hoping that he continues to play his game and drives pucks to the net, as we know how important he is to this blue line, and he's a big minute eater for this Canadiens blue line.
Have you ever had dislocated fingers?
I have, and it hurts. It hurts a hell of a lot.
How'd you do it?
I was changing a brake. I was changing a brake on a Herc.
And at work. Oh, so you got a Veterans Affairs pension?
No, I sucked it up.
Oh, that's all right, Craig.
Okay, do you want me to? Do you have the question? I know what the question is. You want me to just pick it up from there?
Yeah,
just jump in.
Okay, I'll just pick it up from that question. Okay. I think the Montreal Canadiens are a lot like the Minnesota Wild, except better goaltending. That's not a knock against Cam Talbot, but Carey Price is that much better. But the way Montreal plays, they come after you. They come after the front of your net. They defend their net really well. And Minnesota gave Vegas a lot of challenges. Vegas is not very good defending in front of their net. And they're not very good at getting to the other team's front of the net. So when I talk, Jeff Petrie, who, is obviously a significant part of that blue line, getting him in will be important. But, when you look at that 4 defensemen for Montreal, it's not going to be easy for Vegas to score there. And then you're not going to be able to score at distance on Carey Price. You're just not going to be able to. So I think there's a couple of things that really work into Montreal's favor. Number one, the multifaceted scoring approach, scoring off the cycle, getting chances off the cycle, getting into the front of the net, the inner slot, all work. Vegas came out of their series versus Minnesota. They got blown out in game 1. In the last 2 periods of game 2, and games 3 and 4, they were phenomenal. They were really good. But in games 5 and 6, the Colorado Avalanche had those games in control. And, mistakes, 5 turnovers in the 2 games really cost them. And Philip Grubauer wasn't very good in game 6. So it's like, and look, you're looking at the strengths of your team and trying to, get them into the game and get them rolling. And Montreal right now has that. I think that if anything, that Colorado showed a path for Montreal and Minnesota that can work against Vegas. If you would have said to me at the beginning of the playoffs, where would Vegas and Montreal match up? I would say probably not close. I think Montreal has every chance to win this series. I think their strengths and the way they're playing, when you talk about building on their game, because it's building in so many critical areas: the defensive play, the offensive play, the power play, the penalty kill. Like, all these things are all part of the whole thing. And and now as they have them all in order, and they can look at what Minnesota did to have success against Vegas, and certainly what Colorado did in the last 2 games after, for 8 periods really being outplayed. I think that that's really positive for the Montreal Canadiens. And I think the Montreal Canadiens will give the Vegas Golden Knights everything they can handle and more. This is not going to be a walkover by the Vegas Golden Knights. And I said it last week. I can absolutely make a case for Montreal beating Vegas. And it's not a far-fetched case. It's a 50-50 case. But isn't that what it should be at this point in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned knowing your opponents, and you talked about the cycle game. What would the Canadiens have to do to get an edge on defensemen like Peter Angelo or Alec Martinez?
So what I would say is, it's not just those 2 guys are so good, and let's not forget about Shea Theodore, because Shea Theodore is a phenomenal young defenseman. Anyway, they love to try to push you in like they love to press up their defense. And they have their forwards coming back and try to force the play back into the middle where they can come through with speed. So to me, what Montreal has to do is play the game down the wall. They got to get the puck behind those defensemen. And if you're going to try to make lateral passes in the offensive zone, Vegas is just waiting to pick those off. They're waiting to pick those off, and they're going the other way. So you got to be really, really sharp in not playing to Vegas's strengths. And I don't think there's any better example than what the New York Islanders did yesterday versus on Sunday, rather, in game 1, what they did against Tampa Bay. And Barry Trotz said, discipline, making the right decisions. And if you want to, and like I said about Colorado, 5 turnovers just fed right into the Vegas Golden Knights game. And Vegas did not even come close to overwhelming Colorado in those last 2 games. So when you get the puck down into Vegas's zone, play below the dots, and just keep pushing the puck down there. And Montreal, they did it against Toronto. They just kept pressing their defensemen down at the blue line, coming in, obviously support through the middle of the ice. Well, now you can't get out of your zone. So I think it's twofold. Number 1, play the game below the dots in the offensive zone. Don't try to make those lateral plays. Don't try to make hope plays from below the goal line. That's just going to feed their transition. And when you're in your own zone and coming out of your own zone in transition, play it north-south. Don't play it east-west, because they're just waiting for you to go east-west. And they put a lot of pressure on you to force you there. Just keep playing for the next play. Keep playing for the next play. And I think they can. I love Braden McNabb. He's a hard-nosed, aggressive defenseman. But he can be susceptible to speed and quickness. Zach Whitecloud, susceptible to speed and quickness. Nick Holden or Nicholas Hague, susceptible to speed and quickness. Get on them and make them turn and make them go back, because they're not going to, when they can play the game in front of them, any player is going to be better. Turn them around, make them turn back, make them have to make plays with pressure on their backside. Don't let them move up in the play and, create the advantages. So that's where I think Montreal can have a real, Marc-Andre Fleury has been terrific. And I would say this about the Vegas Golden Knights. Ask yourself where they would be without Marc-Andre Fleury, because they could be without Marc-Andre Fleury if they could have found a way to make a deal last year. But he has been, in my view, their most valuable player.
So this sounds to me like a great series for a guy like Josh Anderson to really break out of his little, you're talking north-south, and Josh Anderson lives off the drive to the net to score. And really, we haven't seen anything really from Josh Anderson since game one of the Leafs. So now, do you know if I don't know if you know if he's hurt or if it's just the way the Canadian style's been playing, but do you think Canadians should use him as one of their big weapons against the Vegas?
Well, I think that I don't speculate, and I don't know, so I don't know if he's dealing with anything. But when Josh Anderson is playing at his best, there's two things that he does exceptionally well. He's really skating with speed and quickness, and then the power that he possesses it becomes part of a real significant impact in the game. I always feel that players like Josh Anderson, the skill comes after the skating and the power, not before. So the skill will be there, but don't let the skill come first. Be a power skater, be a power winger, get in there. And he can be a big factor, because on that right side, when you start to look at Caulfield and you look at Gallagher, so I'll take Corey Perry out of this equation right for now. But when you look at Braden McNabb, I can tell you this right now. Braden McNabb is going to try to break Brendan Gallagher and break Cole Caulfield. That's his mentality. That's his mindset. That's his DNA. So Josh Anderson can be a real significant player in really keeping Braden McNabb kind of on level ground. Because trust me, Braden McNabb will take on anybody, but the challenge of taking on a real powerful Josh Anderson can really kind of keep a level playing field, because that's what Braden's going after. He wants to break Gallagher and Cole Caulfield. Make no mistake about it. So Josh becomes really important, in terms of the rotation, not just in terms of what he brings to the game, but in also how he can take a part of the game that Vegas wants to establish, and again, turnovers, pressure, and everything, and just keep the opponent off balance. There's no question that a functioning Josh Anderson is a significant weapon for the Montreal Canadiens in this series, and not just for what he does, but for what he can do to break some of the other opponents. Because what Braden McNabb does also, he gives Shea Theodore a lot of room to roam, because he closes down the play and everything. But if you can keep pushing Braden back and keep making him play turning, going back for pucks, you now are also limiting Shea Theodore. There's a multiple layered effect on Josh Anderson's ability to really play strong in this series.
What about the matchups at center? The Vegas isn't known for its big name centerman. I mean, Stephenson has done a very good job this season. Carlson, he's been solid for them for a couple of years now. But the matchup at center, I mean, the Canadians have Suzuki and Kotkaniemi. They're young, but they have that skill level. What kind of an edge could that possibly give the Canadians?
Well, in the Colorado series, they were up against Nathan McKinnon, and they did a pretty good job. Do you know who checked Nathan McKinnon and got him in check?
Marsha Show? No.
Prayers?
Mark Stone. They used Mark Stone as a winger to come across and really mark Nathan McKinnon. So we talk about the center matchup, right? We talk about the center matchup and how it works. Well, they used a different approach. They said we're going to mark McKinnon. We're gonna use Mark Stone to mark McKinnon, no pun intended. And they did a really good job of that, right? William Karlsson is a really good player. Quietly effective, competitive. You will not push him out of a game. But what William Karlsson is so good at is being able to, play with Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault, so with pace. So they come at you with a real quickness, and Karlsson manages that as a real good two-way center. Chandler Stephenson, with Pacioretty on his left and Stone on his right, he just does his job. And Chandler is a hard player. Hard. There's no area of the game where he's not digging in to the maximum depth. And so that allows Pacioretty, like, he doesn't have to do more than he's asked to do. Stone is brilliant. Stone's a brilliant player. He can do everything in the game. But Chandler Stephenson allows those guys to do different things. He's a great skater and he's a great competitor and he's hard. So now you go down the lineup now, and now you start to look, okay, where can you maybe take advantage? Nicolas Roy, smart player, not a great skater. So that to me is going to be an area, can you take advantage? And then as you get into the fourth line, I mean, they got William Carrier playing there, depending on what they do with Reeves and Colasar, right? So I think Montreal's depth with the three centermen, Kotkaniemi, Suzuki, and Deneau, can gain an edge like in a 3 versus 2 setup. And whoever's going to match up against Nicolas Roy, to me, has to take advantage of him. That to me is where because Stevenson's he's in for the long haul. Carlson's in for the long haul. And so that's where I think that you could dig. And Mark Stone is such a good player. And that Smith, Marchessault, Carlson line really sets they're kind of the trio that sets the tone for Vegas. Coming out of a goal against, they get them out there. Coming out of a power play or a penalty kill, they try to get them out there to try to reestablish that pace of their game. So I would say that you look at the matchup on the blue line versus those two, versus that line. And that's where the shorter period of time that Jeff Petry's out, the less that hole can be exposed, because it is a hole. There's no other way to put it.
So does Montreal's best bet is to match Deneau up with Stone as much as they can? Yeah,
because right now, right, when you start to look at that line, right, you still got Gallagher on his right side, right? So it's about really not. I don't think you just put a centerman on Stone. You got to also have the kind of the layer. Who's the defenseman you want against Stone? Mm. If it's me matching up against them, like you got Edmondson and you got Sherratt, and I'm happy with that. Yeah. Like I'm going to make sure that if it's Deneau out there, that's great. But Suzuki's a smart player. So you're going to go through the series and you're going to be trying to figure out, okay, what is their strength? Who can take it off? Like Nick has this unbelievable, uncanny ability to kind of change pace on you. And he makes you, he corners you. He's a player that puts you into bad spots. And he does it with a brilliant mind. And Deneau does it in a different way. He does it with real smarts, but he's so tenacious and he's so dogged and determined in his approach. So I think it's not just one guy. You can mix that up. But I think when you talk about Stone, it's like, okay, who are you going to match up there against Stone? And I think one of the other things that Montreal has established in this series, again, I talk about Vegas not getting to the inner slot. They're not very good at getting to the inner slot of the slot. They have skill. Don't make any mistake about it. But they like to score off the rush, score off a turnover, score off of a little bit out of distance. So that layer up, where Montreal really found a real strong play versus Toronto and 5-6-7 in Winnipeg. That layer up, I think that they can really push the Vegas Golden Knights. And that's why I say I don't think it's just one player. I think you got to look at a 1-2 combination of players that can play against those guys, but also that layer behind with the defensemen. And certainly when you look at Mark Stone, Sherratt and Edmondson, no worries there. I don't have any worries about those guys going up against them. One of the guys I think you have to be really careful of here in this series is not letting Marchessault and Riley Smith kind of do their thing. I think you gotta, about Stone, about Pacioretty. I talked about Stephenson. Be hard on Riley Smith and Marchessault. Test them. Like, don't let them roam and play to their strengths and everything. If you can do that, now you're shrinking their lineup. And as you get deeper into the playoffs, you want to shrink an opponent's lineup. I think Montreal, with a focus on Marchessault and Riley Smith, don't be surprised. Those guys are good players, but if you can push them out of their strengths, I think you shrink the lineup for Vegas.
Who are your X factors going into the series for either team?
Jeff Petry for Montreal. Like if you're going to play with 4 defensemen, you're really do. So it's Jeff Petry's health, right? Like you don't want to be, I mean, obviously you're without Jeff to start the series, but you don't want to be without him. All of a sudden you're down 2-0. If that happens without Jeff, now you got to win 4 of the next 5. That's not easy to do. Now it's not impossible, and I'm not going to sit here, but I would say Jeff Petry's health, and not just because of what he brings to the team, but because of how they want to play with those 4 defensemen. And, you can put players up in the lineup but you also understand that with those 4, that, that really makes life really, really important for the Montreal Canadiens. I would also say for Montreal, the other X factor for Montreal is really being able to work Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury right now is playing exceptionally well. And, one of the things Marc-Andre does as well as anybody, he reacts to the play after the initial play so well. And I think that Montreal has to be really purposeful in terms of, how you're going to create your chances. And then number 2, how you're going to finish on those second opportunities, because Marc-Andre Fleury is really dialed in. And, that's an area where Sean Burke will be relied upon to try to game plan against Marc-Andre Fleury. So in one way for Vegas, I just talked about Marc-Andre Fleury. He's one X factor. I think the other X factors are Marchessault and Riley Smith. I really do, because if they're allowed to play and skate and do their thing, they're going to have a chance. They can go deeper down to score. I think if you can, really keep them out of the game, and conversely, if Vegas can really make them a factor in the game, that's especially with 4 defense, especially with only 3 to start, that's going to make, that's going to give you a little bit of an upper hand. So I think the plan against Smith and Marchessault has to start right from game 1, and up ice pressure. Grind on them, up. And that's where I think Deneau can be so good, because he's so dogged, and he'll recognize where, he has to apply pressure on those guys and take them out of their game. And, it doesn't just have to be the center, because Carlson is good, but I think if they can establish that early on, I think that Montreal can be in good shape.
An X factor I've been hearing about from some Vegas podcasts and writers and pundits is the crowd, talking about how great the crowd in Vegas is, how big it is, and how the Canadians aren't going to be used to that. I mean, we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens. These guys, they know what crowds are like. So how much of a non-factor is that X factor?
I don't know. Do you think Carey Price is going to be worried about a crowd? Do you think Shea Weber's going to be worried about a crowd? And I'm not just, Edmondson's won a Stanley Cup. Corey Perry's won a Stanley Cup. Eric Stahl's won a Stanley Cup. And there's no bigger crowd than Montreal Canadiens fans. So the players have been dealing with this crowd for a long, long time. And, hey, listen, the noise in a building and the enthusiasm of the fans, hey, it's nice and everything, right? But it works for both sides here. And, when you can work a team and you can continuously push them and keep them, into a state where they can't establish their game, the crowd, what are they going to cheer about? They're going to cheer about stale air. They're going to cheer about somebody winning at the craps tables. You know what? And teams know that going in. You hear the term quiet the crowd. Well, quiet the crowd means we're not going to let their team do the things. Again, I'm going to go back to Tampa Bay on Sunday, game 1. The Islanders, they just quieted Tampa, and then that extended into the crowd. If you want to let them roam and score goals, yeah, guess what? It's going to be pretty loud in there. But if you play your game, I think that Montreal, the crowd, and again, it's one of those things like the crowd. I've never seen a crowd win a game, ever.
For Bergevin, so there's Eric Engels put a story out that Bergevin has a 3-year contract extension in hand that he hasn't signed yet. With this team that he put together, he made the statement, you have players that get you to the playoffs and players that get you through the playoffs. is that how he built his team? Because we all screamed, you need a puck moving defenseman, you need a puck moving defenseman. But now when we look at the structure of its defense in the playoffs, no one cares about the puck moving defenseman. Was his game plan going in thinking we're going to make the playoffs? I want this defense to be a playoff defense.
Well, one thing I will say is that he signed his puck moving defenseman to a long-term contract. Jeff Petries is one of the best puck moving defensemen in the league. He is that good. So I understand. I mean, we all look and go, well, what could they use? Could they benefit from this or whatnot? I think we have to go back to last year, and in the return to play, you know, when the youngsters really showed how good they can be. And listen, you can believe in young players, but you need to see signs of it, right? And I don't question that they believed in them, but they saw signs. And so that now, when Mark went and looked and said, okay, he's watching the playoffs, he's watching Tampa Bay, he's watched the St. Louis Blues the year before, he's watched the Washington Capitals. I mean, Mark's got a very strong resume of playing and being involved in management in the league. And, you know, so now you start to look and go, okay, and let's keep in mind, he had Sherrod, he had Weber, he had Peach. He went and traded for Joel Edmondson to try to, knowing that he had Romanov coming, he was trying to take some of the pressure off those three guys and not push Romanov into situations because it's hard. He goes and gets Josh Anderson, which I think was a different look on the right wing that really, really helped that team. So, you know, you're always trying to build because you got to balance those out. You need regular season success, but that has to carry over into the playoffs. And I don't think there's any question that Mark looked at his team and said, okay, this is what can give us a better chance for success in the playoffs. And that's coming off of some really good signs from the return to play against Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And so now you give the group some more support. And, you know, now it doesn't just rely on Brendan Gallagher. Now he's got Toffoli to help him out. Now he's got Josh Anderson to help out in a little way, in a different way, right? And let's not forget too that, you know, Jonathan Drouin, who's away from the team right now, you know, Jonathan Drouin playing really well adds more skill to this team as well, right? So they're doing this without Jonathan Drouin. And, you know, you look at it and you look at the challenges and the demands of the playoffs, they're real. They're real. You don't get as much time. You don't get as much space. And, you know, you take going forward, it'll be 16 teams out. Didn't you eliminate 8? Now you're down to 4. These are good teams. And if you're not built to withstand the challenges that those teams are going to put on you, you're not going to have success. So I think with Marc Bergevin, I think it was clear what he was trying to do. And again, like, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. The Tampa Bay Lightning are a really good regular season team. And the Vegas Golden Knights in Colorado, but Colorado loses Kadri, they lose Eric Johnson. Well, that's enough to tip the scales in favor of your opponent. I think with Montreal, you know, this is, and I think establishing your game. And I think that's what Montreal did. You know, not that they didn't know what they could be, because we saw signs of it, but they established it. And they just said, we're going to root in here. You know, I know Bob Gainey talked to the Canadians, you know, after their series win against Winnipeg. But I know Bob in 1991 when he was coaching our team with the Minnesota North Stars. You know, that was a team that came out of nowhere, went to the Stanley Cup final. But if you go back and look at what Bob established with that team, okay, here's what we're good at, here's what we need to do, and here's how we got to carry it forth. I think that's what he emphasized with that. That's what I would anticipate he emphasized with this group. And that's what they've done. And I think that the strengths of the team are reflected in Marc Bergevin's moves.
Sticking to Marc Bergevin and kind of the team management as a whole, the Canadians are now in the semifinals, and they didn't go out and go after a big fish. They didn't give up on their future. They didn't go and trade their draft picks. They didn't go trade any prospects. And the Canadians have been building their prospect pool up throughout the years, and they've had multiple years with multiple draft picks. How important is that?
Well, it's important for a lot of different reasons because, you know, you got salary cap considerations, right? And you need young players to come in and play on an entry level contract that can contribute. So, you know, it's not only drafting the right players, it's also being patient with their development and allowing them to come in, not before they're ready to contribute, but when they're ready to contribute. And, you know, that becomes really significant. But when you look at your team and, we talk about Philip Deneau, we talk about Brendan Gallagher, we talk about Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt, like these are all good players, but they can't do it all on their own. And they're not as young and as capable as they were, in some cases 5 years ago, in some cases 3 years ago. So to have young players that come in with an enthusiasm and an ability to play and contribute, those older players, and I'm not trying to call Brendan Gallagher old or Philip Deneau old, but those older players now know, okay, we can do what we're capable of. The younger players don't have to do more than they're capable of. So it all works like hand in hand, like you putting your hand in a glove. So, if you don't have those young players, you're not going to get them anywhere but in the draft. Or if you're going to start trading to try to get a whole bunch of, if you're going to rebuild and you're going to trade your older players for draft picks. So you got to balance it out. And I think, when you look at where Montreal finds itself with its young players, I mean, Kotkaniemi didn't start the playoffs. Caulfield didn't start the playoffs. Romanov's played one game. And, they're all a huge part of the future for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, not a part of the future, a huge part of the future. And that becomes it. And there's some other really good prospect. I don't want to take out Suzuki because he's right in there too, right? Like, but you need, it goes without saying you need good players, but you need to balance it out. You need to sync it. Older players that maybe aren't quite at the same level they were when a little bit younger players who aren't quite where they're going to be when they're a little bit older. And everybody now can work to their strengths, and that's what makes a team better. And I think that's where Montreal finds itself right now.
Speaking of the whole being better than the sum of its parts, how much of an impact is this confidence that the Canadiens are now holding, that Price has given them, that they see in themselves? How much of that is an impact on what they can do going forward?
I listen, when you're trying to compete, and when I say trying to compete, when you're competing and that it's only about one thing, finding a way to win, and you're finding those ways to win, it just builds a conviction in not only your own individual contributions and your own individual ability to contribute. It also builds the overall team, what I call the esprit de corps. And when you have that esprit de corps and everybody looks around and everybody goes, okay, we know exactly what we're going to get from Eric Staal. And Eric Staal looks and goes, I know exactly what I'm going to get from Tyler Toffoli. And Shea Weber goes, okay, tonight we got game one. We're going to be without Petrie, right? So here's what we need from everybody. And those guys come in and, say, here's how we're going to do it. I watched Daryl Sutter in 2004 with the Calgary Flames. They ended up with a lot of injuries on the blue line. And one of the things Daryl is exceptional at is he says, here's your game. Here's what I need from you. I'm not going to ask you to do more. Don't give me less. Right. And I think that's where Montreal finds themselves right now. Are you going to replace Jeff Petrie? No. But is your team going to capsize? It shouldn't. And I don't think they will. But it's everybody coming in with that understanding. Okay, here and there's security around you, right? Like, when you look around and you got Carey Price in the net, and you know what Philip Deneau is going to do, and you know what Shea Weber is going to do, and you're, hey, game on, let's go, right? And there's a security in that too. It's not just a confidence; it's a security in knowing, hey, we weren't hanging on here. We dictated the game and we pushed the game in our favor, and that becomes really significant for confidence building.
Do you think Ducharme did the right move by bringing the young guys in slowly instead of pushing them right into the series?
Well, I have to say in hindsight, yes. Yeah, but because, I think I was looking at the beginning, I'm going I thought Kotkaniemi, Caulfield, and Romanov were good players that shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines. But I can tell you this, the coaches sit in that office and they debate a lot of different things, right? And certainly, you can look back and say, oh, geez, well, maybe if they would have had those guys in earlier, they wouldn't have found themselves down 3-1. You know what? It's all speculation. I don't know that. But, I'm a big believer that, we're going to have opinion on outside of the group and say what we think, right? but ultimately the coaching staff is going through all the different scenarios, and they know their group better than anybody else. And whether we agree with them or not, or whether they're right or they're not, they're making those decisions with a lot of information and a lot of time spent with those players. So, and now you see where the Canadians find themselves. It's hard to argue with Dominik Ducharme's position that, we're going to have an opportunity to put them in there. We just don't feel that opportunity is at the beginning. And, certainly with Kotkaniemi going in and Caulfield going in, and, I have to imagine that Romanov, and I got to say to you guys, I've always been impressed with Alexander Romanov. I love him. I'm unabashed in my love for, but even when he talks about no, I'm going to play. I'm just here for the team. Right. And there's no BS there. That is real. He loves to play. He loves to be part of a team. And even in that game 4, I went back and watched it again over. He didn't make a mistake in that game. He didn't play a lot, but that speaks volumes about what his potential is. And you saw it over the course of the year. Whatever he's going to be asked to do, I can say this with a real strong sense of confidence. Whether it's 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes, he's going to give you the best 8, 10, 12 minutes of competitiveness and fire. And I think he's a smart player, and I don't think he'll be overwhelmed either getting into an environment where the stakes are a little bit higher. So I think Dominik is, you have to say that he's pushed all the right buttons here. and despite being down 3-1, his plan was what it was to do. He didn't want to be down 3-1, but he found himself there. But they're in a much better place than they were 3 weeks ago.
Well, they went from 3-1 down to dominating. I thought they dominated Winnipeg in that entire series.
Totally agree.
I don't think Winnipeg, none of the Winnipeg shot. Carey Price never had a really hard shot in that entire series. Really.
Well, that's where we talk about keeping teams to the outside, right? So and Winnipeg's better at getting to the net than Vegas. So again, this is what Vegas is going to be confronted with. And, again, if you want to give them those easy goals and those easy chances off the rush, off of turnovers, they have enough skill to make you pay. But Montreal didn't, and Winnipeg's a very talented team, very talented forwards, and they were very good at not giving Winnipeg. And to your point too, and I know that we go back, and I mentioned Scheifele earlier, but Scheifele had reached a point in that game 1 where, he had a level of frustration going in the game, and there's no excuse for his play on Jake Evans. But why were the players there on Winnipeg? It was because of what Montreal was doing. They came in there after, winning game 7. They came right into Winnipeg with the attitude that oh yeah, great, you swept Edmonton. They're different than us. Deal with us. And they established it. Right like that, they established how they were going to play. Winnipeg was never able to find their footing.
Do you think the break Montreal is having is going to hurt them going into Vegas? Are they going to lose momentum here?
It's such a. Can we talk after game 1? I'll tell you why I say that though, because we hear the rust versus rest, all the time, right? So Vegas Golden Knights win game 7, right? And against Minnesota, and they go into Colorado and get obliterated, right? Montreal wins game 7, and they go into Winnipeg against a rested team, and they take it to the Jets. So, I think it's different series. I'm a huge believer that rest is always helpful, when the grind has been significant. We look down the stretch at how many games Montreal played. There's also, mental fatigue that goes into you were down 3-1. The pressure you put on yourself. We can't make a mistake. We got to find a way to get through this. And, so being able to get through 4 games and now be able to not just rest physically, but rest mentally and get rejuvenated. I'm always going to take rest over that. And I think Montreal, again, back to the way they're playing, they know what their game is. They know what the strengths of their game is, and they know what they have to do to get the train back rolling again, up to speed to what we've seen through the last 7 games.
Your thoughts on Max Pacioretty playing against his former team in the semifinals? Something that we wouldn't obviously have seen without say COVID terms.
Yeah, well, you're right. So the first thing I'm going to do, and you guys can answer this question after, but I'm going to pose the question first. And I think it would be great if we get to a point now when we have 4 teams left. Why don't we reseed them? Just reseed them. Doesn't matter what. So anyway, your thoughts, you can give me your answers after. But I think that the opportunity for a Vegas Montreal semifinal or a Tampa Bay Montreal Stanley Cup final, whatever. Like I think these are great things for the game, and I think that like instead of it being East West. Anyway, just my thought. Something came out of COVID. So, when you start talking about, you know what? I want blank.
That's okay.
I was too worried about my question and not listening to you, Blaine. What was the question again?
No, that was Matt's question.
Matt.
Oh, was it Matt? Matt, sorry.
Okay, just your thoughts of Max
Pacioretty.
Yeah, Pacioretty playing against his team. Yeah.
All you have to do is say 67. I would have got it. Right?
No worries.
It's like an empty net goal.
Yeah. Well, like Max has been a good player for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yes.
When you go back to that trade too, and it's never. I mean, nobody sits down and says, "I'm going to go trade my captain," right? But that's what he was. But he was in a different contractual state and pending unrestricted free agent, but coming up, right? And Marc Bergevin was looking at his team and trying to find different areas where he could strengthen it. And at that time, if we go back and look, okay, when that trade was made, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, I think the trade was made before Jesperi Kotkaniemi was drafted, if I recall correctly. Am I right there, or was it after?
It was
just
after.
after.
It was just after, right?
Yeah.
So, and you've heard me say this with you guys. If you want to draft a top 2-line center, if you want to get a top 2-line center, you better draft them because you can't trade for them. They're almost impossible to trade for. So they draft Kotkaniemi and then they go and get Suzuki. Now, those are projections. Don't get me wrong. But I think Mark was looking at his team in terms of salary cap and saying, okay, we're not going to be able to improve our team if we're giving this much money to Max Pacioretty. He's a left winger and a good one. Don't get me wrong. We're going to have to look at other areas. And I think Mark made a shift to trying to build his team in what I think is a very critical area. That's center ice. So, so that's my preamble. Max has been a good player for the Vegas Golden Knights. And he's been a player that when the games become a little bit more challenging, a little bit more serious, he's delivered for the Vegas Golden Knights. And, if you ask Kelly McCrimmon about adding Max Pacioretty and signing him to a long-term contract or a longer-term contract, it wasn't real long-term, it was only 4-year extension. He's thrilled. But so is Marc Bergevin with the trade of Nick Suzuki, right? So, I mean, and I don't want to dismiss Thomas Tatar out of this. I mean, I know he hasn't played, but he's been a good goal scorer for the Montreal Canadiens, and they may need him at some point in this series. But when you look at finding that centerman like Suzuki, and certainly what the Vegas Golden Knights were looking for with more goals scoring than Pacioretty, I think both teams have to be happy. And we sit here, and I think Max, is determined to do everything he can to help the Vegas Golden Knights beat the Montreal Canadiens. And I would say if we put the truth serum in him, that if they do accomplish that, he'll have just a little greater measure of happiness to be able to do it against the team that traded him, just like all players. But I think that again, when you look at it, it's a trade that's worked out tremendously well for both teams for what they were both looking for at the time.
It's one of those rare cases of a real win-win trade. Both teams got exactly what they wanted at the time they needed it. And I don't know. I think maybe if the Canadians can pull off the win, maybe we can stop hearing the Max Pacioretty, Presty Holmes commercials out of Montreal.
Listen, Max Pacioretty was drafted by the Canadiens. He performed really well for the Canadiens, right? Mark Stone was drafted by the Ottawa Senators. He performed really well for the Ottawa Senators. They play on a different team now. And if there's anything I've learned, and again, I'll go back to 1993, the last time the Canadiens won a Stanley Cup. Bob Gainey, he traded Brian Bellows to the Montreal Canadiens, and Brian won a Stanley Cup. And you're not trading Brian Bellows because you don't like Brian Bellows. You're trading Brian Bellows because you're looking at your team and you're saying, we need something different. We have some areas of our team that we need to bolster. And that's what it comes down to. Brian was a second overall pick to the North Stars, scored 50, was good. And he goes to Montreal. But Bob wasn't worried about Brian going to Montreal, and certainly was thrilled for Montreal winning a Stanley Cup and happy for the players, and Brian certainly. But his focus was on trying to do what he could for his team and the Minnesota North Stars in this case. And I think that's always has to be the focus when you're a manager. It can't be about, oh, I'm not going to trade him. What happens if he comes back to haunt us? No. It's about what you're doing to help your own team be successful. And, without belaboring the point, I think that's exactly what both these general managers were able to do with that trade with Pacioretty for Suzuki. And, again, Max was a good Montreal Canadian, but, where they were headed, they weren't on a path where they could move along it together for different reasons. And that's not Montreal's fault. That's not Max Pacioretty's fault. That was just dealing with the reality of the situation.
Now we're gonna switch gears a little bit to predictions as we come near the end of the show. The main prediction. This is the big one here. If the Canadiens can win the series, what national monument's going to be lit red, white, and blue after the series?
That is, well, we have the CN Tower. We have Niagara Falls now, right?
We gotta go straight to Parliament Hill, I guess.
That's what I think. Where else can you go if they're Canada's team? I think the Canadian flag comes down from Parliament Hill and the Canadians flag goes up there, doesn't it? Is that what goes up there? Really? I think that's what should happen, right? I think that the Confederation Bridge and connecting New Brunswick and PEI will be now known as the Canadians Bridge, right? The Calgary Tower will be known as the Canadians Tower, and we'll just Edmonton might rename their city the City of Montreal Champions.
See, these are the kinds of predictions that we look for here. These are the in-depth ones. What about you, Treg? What do you think?
What national? I think we should just take the Rockies and put big strobe lights on them, red, white, and blue, and then that'll do that.
Hey, Treg, I'll tell you what. At Lake Louise in the winter, they do great ice sculptures, and it freezes over, right? And so they could do that on Lake Louise. They could, one of the most picturesque places in Canada. They could take that. The Forks of Winnipeg could become the Forks of Canadians. I'm just trying to go right across the country and just name it all off. Right, the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor and Detroit will become the Canadians Bridge, and
just change the name Canada to Canadians.
Yeah, there we go. Right. Where are you from? Canadians.
I know I'm on the East Coast. I'm working on getting all the warships lit up red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
So, Matt, what about you?
I go with Parliament Hill. You got to go with the stable. That's what everyone thinks of when they think of the country, right? So, I'm going to definitely have my flag up at work. I'm in Ontario. There's a lot of Leaf fans around, and if I can get a Canadians flag in the back of a Herc for a flight, I'll definitely do it.
I'm sure you'd get some support on that.
Absolutely.
There's Canadians fans all across the country. All you got to do is just tune into Montreal Canadiens games when they travel, whether it be in Winnipeg or Edmonton or Calgary or Vancouver. The building becomes 5,000-6,000 strong with Canadiens fans, and it's pretty neat.
Yeah, the Habs fans do travel well.
They do.
They're loud. They're in your face. Usually drunk at a game, but it's fun.
Let me tell you this: there will be a lot of Canadiens fans at the game in Vegas.
Yep.
Yeah, we mentioned that on our last show too. Like a lot of Vegas always gets a lot of Canadiens fans when they play there.
Oh yeah, and so it's not going to be lopsided in favor of Vegas Golden Knights fans. Good friends of ours from Montreal. They live in San Diego now, and their whole family's going for them. and they were there for game 6, but they got their tickets for Montreal, Vegas for games 1 and 2, and they're thrilled. But don't be surprised. There'll be lots of Canadiens fans in that crowd in Vegas. So the Vegas Golden Knights, whoever they want to talk about, they can talk about all the how great their fans are and everything. Canadiens fans will be buying up tickets in Vegas.
What about you boys? You got anything else you want to ask?
I'm just going to get to the real predictions. Blaine, what do you say? What do you say for the series?
I say it's going to be 7 games.
Oh, okay. I like that answer. Matt?
Do you know what? Since the playoffs have started, the Leafs were a big favorite. The Jets were a favorite. I've stuck with the Canadiens each time. I'm going to say Canadiens in 6.
That's my prediction. 6. Craig, I know you're going to say someone who's going to win 4 games.
No. Listen, after the way Montreal played against Toronto, I thought they had a really good chance to beat Winnipeg. I thought it would be a competitive series, but Winnipeg, really, not only the loss of Scheifele, but they got beat by a better team. So again, I try to look at the things that I think are really important to winning and to sustaining success. And I think Montreal has those things in place. And as I mentioned earlier, when I talk about Vegas, I think Vegas has some areas of vulnerability that Montreal can take advantage of. I really do. Now, again, Jeff Petrie is a significant part of this team. And you go deeper in the playoffs, it becomes harder and harder to overcome the loss of really, really good players. And, that's just the way it goes. But I think Montreal can win this series. I really don't have, and when I talk about 2012 LA Kings, the LA Kings kept going through the playoffs and people, oh yeah, well, their bubble will burst here. Their bubble never burst because they were not going to let their bubble burst. I feel that about the Montreal Canadiens. I think Montreal wins this in 6 or 7.
Now, how important would it be for the NHL to have a Montreal-New York final?
I hear a lot about Montreal, New York. I mean, obviously Montreal is a huge traditional market. We're talking about, one of the greatest sporting franchises of any sporting franchise in the world, right? Obviously the Islanders, I think if, again, everybody talks about the New York Rangers, what the Islanders have done would be tremendous, to see them back in the Stanley Cup final, long storied history there. But I think right now when you're looking at it, Tampa Bay, Montreal, Vegas, Tampa, I mean, you got 4 teams that are really good, that are really playing well. And I know we hear a lot, oh, you want the big markets. No, what you want is good teams. And if you have good teams that play really well and can be really entertaining, I think that trumps everything else. And if you can have the Chicago Blackhawks in it, or the LA Kings in it, or the New York Rangers, or the Philadelphia Flyers, or the Montreal Canadiens, or Toronto, yeah, it makes but you don't want anything less than the best teams playing. So I think that a Montreal, New York Islander, fine. I would just like to see if they could get more fans into the Bell Center. That to me would be really neat because, I know everybody talks about Vegas, and I've been in all the buildings around the league. There is no better building for noise and for fan enthusiasm and fan passion than the Bell Center with the Montreal. There's none. And it starts an hour before the game, long before the warm-up starts, and as the games become the rivalry games, the playoff games, the significance of the games grows. No, there's nothing better than Montreal. And I've been in them all. And I'm not trying to say that other buildings aren't loud or aren't good. None better than Montreal.
Any last ideas or thoughts there, boys?
I just want to say thanks a lot for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you. We'll definitely have you back anytime you're available.
Yeah.
And thanks for, getting us into your schedule today. It's much appreciated.
No, well, you got me into your schedule too. I mean, we're working at nights and everything, so not a problem. You you guys are great. You guys love your Canadians. You deliver to the fans who are so incredibly passionate. So for me to be even asked to be part of it is always a real honor for me. So thank you guys.
You're very welcome.
Trey?
I'm just going to say I got a new article out for the Hockey Writers. 3 Canadians that need to step up in the Vegas series. Go to the Hockey Writers, read that. That's all I got to say.
Who are they?
I have Josh Anderson,
Yep, agreed.
Brendan Gallagher, and Cole Caulfield. Now, Gallagher and Caulfield, not so much that they're playing badly, but if they can get the goal, if they can play their game and get the goal, like Caulfield can start scoring goals, that's going to be a major step for the Montreal Canadiens and another problem for Vegas to deal with. And for Gallagher, I think on Marc-Andre Fleury, he needs to get those dirty Gallagher goals to beat Fleury. So the other two isn't so much that they're playing badly, it's so much if they can step up their game, it just gives Montreal that much more of an advantage.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, we talked about Josh, and I agree with you on the other two guys. And the other thing, when I was talking about Marc-Andre Fleury, see, a guy like Gallagher can be a terrific distraction, because now you have to be so aware of him, because on those second opportunities, Brendan's dogged, just like Marc-Andre's trying to get somewhere. Well, Brendan's trying to get to the same spot to try to get the puck in the net as Marc-Andre. So I agree with you. I think that Brendan can be he can have a real impact in this series, specifically, right, what you talked about on Marc-Andre Fleury. So, okay, now I don't have to go read the article. I agree with you. And
It's better off that way. It's better off. But
no, do you have an audio version, Trey?
I do not. No.
Oh, okay. I'm only listening to podcasts and audiobooks now.
Well, when you make that kind of money, you may as well, right?
Yeah.
We'll read it to you.
Do you guys ever watch Seinfeld? Do you ever go back in Seinfeld lore? Do you remember when he was trying to get a book in audio because he didn't want to read it, but it bothered him because the voice was his own?
Yeah.
That would be, I don't like audiobooks, to be honest with you. I like podcasts, but I'm not big on the audiobooks. I've tried them a few times. Don't interest me.
Yeah. I do prefer reading myself. Yeah. Fall asleep a little bit easier that way. But no, Craig, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you doing this. I know right from the start, you thought we were going to come and attack you about the start of the playoffs, but we're more subtle that way.
Here's what I would tell you is this, like I said about predictions, you can only be right or wrong. But I said to Mitch Melnick on Montreal radio, I said, okay, just tell me where I went wrong. Tell me where going into the playoffs that you really thought. He goes, well, I said, okay, how about after game 4? He goes, wow. Yeah, I said, so, it's just, again, I'm happy for the Montreal Canadiens fans, but they really hadn't given me, they'd given me too many reasons not to believe in them. Well, I'll tell you what they've done. They've certainly flipped the script, and they've given me a lot of reasons to believe in them now, because the way they're playing, that's what you need to do to have playoff success.
Well, I hope to God that we get to see more playoff success from that team, because the longer they go, the better it is. That means my wife leaves me alone for a little bit longer. The honey-do list doesn't start until they're done.
That's okay. That's a good arrangement.
And a charity that we're doing, we're giving $25 to the well, you say it, Blaine. You got the whole
the Montreal Canadiens Children's Foundation.
Yeah, for every Canadians win in the playoffs, so that keeps growing. We put more money in, and so that's what.
Oh, that's awesome! Well. Yeah, you talk about the children hospital and everything, and how the Montreal Canadiens have been connected with that for years. Winning is always good, and it's not going to take anything away from the involvement with the Montreal Canadiens, but this is just another one that boosts it. So
yeah,
great to hear you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, and thank you very much, Craig, for giving us some of your time. We truly appreciate it. And for our listeners, thank you for listening. And remember, if you are talking about it, so are we.